Welcome back. Um, okay, I have bundle of videos that I want to share. And so I have several videos that I want to show to you today. Mind you, these videos are derived from documentaries that are on Amazon, some that are on YouTube, BBC, PBS. So there's a whole, so this is really a distillation of, what's got to be maybe 15 hours of video. So anyway, so I have several clips from here, which is to show you what happens at Sarajevo. Sarajevo really shined in the Winter Olympics of 1984. It was a home for a diverse set of people, religions, ethnicities. The city really presented open arms and was a jewel city of the Balkans. Just 8 years after the Olympics, the city was under siege. And 4 years later, when the siege concluded, more than 11,000 people were killed, including 1,600 children. One of the things I find significant about Sarajevo is that at the point in time that all of this erupted, this was a city like any other that was a civilized modern day city, vibrant, and suddenly it was disrupted with bombs. Um, we also have, and I'm going to jump through the videos, try not to interrupt so that you can see them. I've narrowed it down a bit so we have a little extra time at the end. We have a visitor in the class today who is a survivor of the events that took place at Srebrenica that we looked at last week. And I'd like to have her talk with us for a little bit. So with that, let me get us to Sarajevo.
I'm writing to you from the end of the world. In the Dinaric Alps of southeastern Europe is the city of Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Famous for its culture of openness and tolerance, and nicknamed the Jerusalem of Europe, Sarajevo's Christians, Muslims, and Jews coexisted in peace for centuries. A cosmopolitan city that was the heart of Yugoslavia's arts, music, and culture, Sarajevo became famous in the modern era for hosting the 1984 Winter Olympic Games. Only 8 years later, as Yugoslavia was torn apart, a cloud of darkness descended on this beautiful city. The world watched in horror as a medieval siege, the longest of the 20th century, was presented live on television. But the world stood by for years, doing nothing, as Bosnia bled.
We all live in big apartment complexes that They were not architecturally beautiful at all, but pretty much they looked like a big matchboxes, but they were full of very interesting people. The whole environment was quite lively and noisy. I remember.
Živjela sam cijeli život u Sarajevu na Čengić vili. Mislim, ja sam odgojena kao Titov pionir, mi smo bili sretna djeca u vrijeme naše države Jugoslavije. Zaista nisam nikakvih problema imala. Bila je Jugoslavija u krizi, znali smo mi na televiziji, nema se ekonomska kriza, cijeli svoj život živimo u ekonomskoj krizi, tako da smo se na to potpuno navikli, na to se djeca, mladi ne obaziru. Putovali smo, moji roditelji su bili normalni neki stalež, 2-3 puta godišnje na more, malo inozemstvo. Mislim, jedan normalni život jedne srednje klase, ne znam sad na što bi stavila akcent. U svakom slučaju, mislim da sam bila kao dijete sretna, da sam živjela jedno sretno djetinjstvo i mladost bez problema. Nama je glavno bilo zasvirat, zapjevat, onda u Sarajevu, ti si odrastao u Sarajevu, znaš kako u Sarajevu, moraš znati prihvatiti šalu na svoj račun. Napraviti šalu na svoj račun, onda da ti se smije 20 ljudi, nema veze, haha, sutra ćemo se smijati nekom drugom. Tako da, to je bio način života, onako, lagano.
I am Vedran Smailović, the cellist of Sarajevo. I am born in Sarajevo, 1956. In a family Smailović, we all play, we are all occupied by music. Father was composer, professor, magister of composition. Older sister played piano and professor of piano, and
blackout.
Sister, well, older, only 1 year, they are violinists, and the youngest sister is as well violinist. In our home was always full of music and love. That's the main thing what we teach from our parents. And happy childhood. And that's the idea of my father, that music is not only for rich people. The nice, beautiful music belongs as well to poor people. So we play all around Bosnia, all around Yugoslavia, in small villages, same as the biggest halls.
In September 1992, I was photographing at Lion Cemetery when I heard the haunting sounds of a cello. I saw a man wearing a tuxedo, seated on a chair, playing in one of the most dangerous places in besieged Sarajevo, easily within range of shells and snipers.
Blacking out again.
Before Sarajevo city, we are all mixed. We never ever have any single problem about religion. Different names, so what? We mixing. My kids are all mixed. I mean, I have to cut my child on 8 pieces and say, this is Hungarian piece, this is Italian piece, this is Catholic, this is Gypsy, this is... Hello? Who care about that? Only primitive people, that's so important to say, this half is Muslim, this half is Serb. No!
We all were growing in peaceful Yugoslavia and multi-ethnic Sarajevo. My friends were coming from Croatian, Serbian, Bosnian, Muslim, Jewish ethnic backgrounds, or kids from so-called mixed marriages, as about 1/3 of the population in Sarajevo were coming from these mixed backgrounds. After I finished high school, I decided to study medicine. I'm not sure if playing music and practicing medicine have something in common, but I somehow developed interest in both.
When Sarajevo was chosen as host of the 1984 Winter Olympic Games, it was the moment when the city became known for other than the infamous assassination that triggered World War I in 1914. But today, all that is left of those games are mainly ruined facilities where so much joy and triumph took place.
Ja sam bila 3. razred srednje škole kad su bile u Sarajevu olimpijske igre. To je bio fantastičan događaj. Nisam ja imala nikakvu ulogu tu. Neki koji su se znali bolje probiti su imali nekakve uloge, hostese, nosači zastava, ne znam šta. Ja sam čistila snijeg. Ja sam čistila snijeg. Ja sam bila u ekipama za čišćenje snijega. Imala sam veliko društvo, mislim, društvena sam osoba, imala sam bliske prijateljice, prijateljice ko sestre koje spavaju jedne kod druge na večer. Šta smo mi sad sve skupa radili? Mi smo se znali naći po stanovima, pa smo svirali gitaru, pjevali, pravili, to se u Sarajevu zove dernek.
We convinced ourselves maybe that our army would never turn their guns in canyons and they would never start firing at its own people. Remember on TV there was a general saying, ex-Yugoslav army general was saying in the midst of that chaos, somewhere in front of the camera when Sarajevo was being attacked, everyone is shooting on Sarajevo, something like that, but not the Yugoslav army. It was just mind game and mind-boggling, but it was happening, and yet we had difficulties believing it was real.
Neko je morao i tu.
Neko i tu morao, jeste.
Da doživi.
By the time we realized what was going on and what has happened, the siege around Sarajevo was already set up, and mass killings of civilians began.
27th May 1992, I wake early morning and I do some job. Coming back home, I heard, it was after 10, I heard that there was massacre close to my home. I run straight away down to help people. I see some horrible scene of wounded blood. Believe me, walking on a blood is much harder than walking on ice. Blood, very thick blood on a road that's so slippery. And people trying to collect, help wounded people, over 100 wounded, 22 dead instantly. That's terrible scene, unbelievable. And on the top of that, why? Instead of bread, these poor people get a shell, a mortar, explosion. I see one neighbor as well, because all these people are my neighbor. And I see one neighbor carry leg separate of a body, and he put that leg to the man who lost the leg, put it on his chest. So maybe doctor should do a miracle.
This is a triage, a trauma. So we would just kind of wait for the wounded and casualties. At the day of the big grenade in Vasa Miskina, it was around 10 o'clock, and I was walking it. We knew that something was really huge and big. So I remember I'm approaching here, and all this place was filled with wounded and casualties. People were brought in cars and blankets, and it was just triage. It was a horrific picture.
He was all under shock. everybody, every single man cry. I don't sleep that night. And I wake early next morning, not knowing why. I feel so empty. For us, life is very important things, but for monsters, life is nothing. So that morning, I take tuxedo, I wash my face, shave nicely. I grab my cello, walking down the street, and find myself on a dead place where was massacre. And I grabbed the chair from nearest restaurant and open my cello, and I start to play. I have no clue what am I going to play. So after a few tones, I realized that's Albinoni Adagio. So I play, I cry. People cry around me. Somebody pray on one way, somebody on the other way. Bunches of flowers all around. And the other guy, he was painter, he asked me, Vedran, what time tomorrow you coming to play? I said, what? No, it's not planned. I don't think I'm coming. And everybody jumping, oh yes, you help us, you're doing that.
Chaos would usually come in organized fashion. It was just sometimes just peaceful morning, and then suddenly, boom, 4 or 5 grenades right into apartment building. Civilians and kids would be targeted very, very often, and it was actually norm. 1992, when the war began, I found myself working as a resident at the Clinic for Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery at University Clinical Center in Sarajevo. That was actually, you know, the war zone, the major trauma unit for all the casualties in the city and around the city. The work was trying to address all these huge injuries, you know, bone, tissue, defects that needed to be covered and taken care of. Just time really for stopping bleeding, and with no time to address the profound loss, emotional loss, and all these soul wounds. It was no time for any kind of feelings or mourning or, you know, just basically often familiar sense of presence and numbness in the same time. Maimed bodies of young men and women, children, elderly, with the huge wounds. I remember the noise. The only quiet person usually would be wounded. People mourning and calling for God and mothers.
It's difficult to communicate that dreaded, empty feeling that you're sort of there, but you're not there. It's interesting how someone can totally dissociate from themselves, as if my body is here, but my brain isn't.
They export me. Thank you, UN.
The whole city quickly, you know, jumped into some sort of survival mode. The society, the fabric society crumbled, and people initially felt very, very anxious, of course. But then everybody were very focused on surviving, and there was an idea that came so apparent that we have to rely on each other to survive. Neighbors who wouldn't talk to each other started developing very close relationship. We rely on each other, compassion, affinity, helping each other, you know, in contrast with aggressiveness, destruction, hate. And I've seen kind of the worst, both aspects, what war can bring in people. And that was fascinating to watch people still trying not to sink into deep depression, not to despair. Whole city was very proud in terms of showing the world and the enemies that we will not surrender. The city will not sink into depression, that you can bomb us, but you cannot break our spirit.
We were living in an isolated, besieged city, besieged ghetto, total, helpless, and desperate. The world knew what was going on here, but no one would do anything to help.
Pa ovako, izlazit se moralo. Znači, nije se moglo živjeti u Sarajevu 4 godine da ne izađeš. Izlazit se moralo iz više razloga. Nisam svaki put išla na posao, izlazila sam iz drugih razloga. Išla sam u potragu za kruhom, išla sam u potragu za vodom, išla sam u potragu za bilo čim što se može naložiti. Znači, mi smo stalno negdje morali izlaziti. Mi smo razvili neke životinjske instinkte kada se smije izaći, kada se ne smije izaći. Mi smo znali ocijeniti po zvuku, po tom jezivom zvuku te artiljerije, koga oni taj dan tuku. Aha, danas tuku trg neće nas. Mi smo udaljeni od trga kilometar. Govorimo o trgu heroja. Ali danas tuku trg, i mi izađemo i obavljamo svoje poslove koje moramo. Tako da smo se mi toliko navikli. Čovjek se navikne na najgore stvari. Čovjek se navikne na situaciju na koju ne može vjerovati da će se naviknuti. Tako da smo mi izlazili smo da sjedimo ispred zgrade, da se sunčamo, da se ugrijemo.
One of hardest thing is you have to go for water. And Sarajevo is in a valley. All mountains around, Olympic mountains. We have Olympic Games, Winter Olympic Games 1984. Now this mountain is full of water, healthy water, best water in Europe and one of best in the world. But the water was under control of Chetniks. So they release water when they want. And they know where water coming out in a city. So they know where they're going to shell. So they're doing massacres while people collecting water. That's madness. I remember we wait for Bill Clinton to become president. And hope now he can do something and stop the war. And that's only dream. After dream, we wake.
Death was everywhere. You're alive, you're still there, and you focus on those who are still alive. Unfortunately, not on those who are lost. It's just time for here and now. So that kind of pretty cold at times and rational, even animal response. I'm talking about, as they say sometimes, that reptilian brain-driven experience. It was a journey into that primitive and primordial way of functioning, close to that pulse and heartbeat, only in here and only now. When you would run across the street or trying to take a shelter, estimating, the speed and velocity of the projectile that you were sort of trying to avoid.
Even the back roads that pedestrians took to avoid the snipers were not without their dangers. We dashed across open intersections in order to escape the sniper's bullet.
Šest traka. A pošto ja tamo nisam često išla, to me posebno ulijeva poseban strah, jer sam ja one ulice koje sam svakodnevno prelazila, znala taktiku, znala sam otprilike, mi smo znali kako se ti snajperisti gore ponašaju. Znali smo, tu ima jedan koji će pucati 5 minuta pa će otići popiti što god. imaš pauzu da preletiš. Onda ovdje ima jedan koji, ne znam, gađa ispod nogu da te zastraši, ali neće. Mislim, nažalost, tako se iskristalizirala neka mjesta gdje ćeš lakše ili teže pritrčati. Ali to nisam baš dobro poznavala. Tako da sam ja tu stajala i gledala šta drugi ljudi rade, da vidim koju taktiku da upotrijebim. Međutim, nema druge taktike. Sačekaj, pogledaj, sad u ovom trenutku je prestao pucat, mora da se okrene da popije malo rakije. I onda 100 na sat. Ptica trkačica. Ja nemam pojma da je rođe tamo bio. Mislim, o tome apsolutno ništa nisam znala, niti sam ja promatrala šta drugi ljudi oko mene.
This became an iconic photograph.
Ne rade, ti se baviš svojim poslom i spašavaš svoj život. Sad, ako ja vraćam film, znači ja sam nekako došla do toga grada, centra, uzela taj svoj paketić, malo se vidjela s kolegama s kojima se nisam dugo vidjela i sa tim paketićem, sva sreća pa je bio mali, pa sam mogla s njim trčati nazad. Ali kad sam se vraćala, već nije bilo trčanje, bilo je malo i puzanja. Malo je počela jača vatra. Tako da sam ja na kraju, tamo gdje sam tamo bila ptica trkačica, na kraju bila gmizavi crv. Ali eto, vratila sam se živa, očigledno. Nisam ja nikakva heroina, ja sam najveći strašljivac koji postoja u Sarajevu. Mislim, i najbrži. Ali morao si. Šta ćeš, živiš, ne možeš iz te kože.
Years and years, I cry. Once you have post-war trauma stress, it stays forever. There is no psychiatry, psychologist, counselor. There is no tablets you can go out of that. Somebody say you have to talk more about and to release yourself. Somebody saying you don't need to talk. Whatever you do, it stays there. It's deep in your brain, and you have to cope just to carry that like your rucksack. You carry that, and you cannot never ever release of that stress. So, crying day by day, watching on a TV news, each day is somewhere a bomb. I hear that bomb differently than other, and I have to cry again, because I hear that sounds. Even I talk sometimes to myself, trying, yes, that's it, but you have to go through that. Okay, it's past, it's gone. Yes, it's past tense, but it's here, it's in a brain. In a brain is not past tense, it's here. It exists. So, it can never ever don't go out.
Možda moja djeca nekad meni kažu mama što si ti nervozna, živčana, ja njima kažem ja sam preživjela rat, ja imam pravo biti nervozna. Ali Ja sam, ne mogu reći da sam zahvalna ili zadovoljna. Mislim, to se jednostavno tako dogodilo. Neko je imao tu sreću da je ostao živ, neko nije. Ja imam obitelj, ja živim nekim normalnim životom, ali moj život je uništen, oni su uništili moj život. Oni su uništili život cijele moje generacije, nekoliko generacija. Meni se ovo nije trebalo dogoditi. Ja nisam trebala biti tu gdje sam sada, ja sam trebala biti negdje sasvim drugo. Ja nisam ista osoba koja sam bila, niko nije od nas ista osoba. Oni su meni uništili život i uništili su moju budućnost kako sam ja htjela za sebe. I to će se opet dogoditi. Nemam baš optimističku misao o tome. Ja to mogu zataškavati, ali to se dogodilo i to se ne može izbrisati. To se ugradilo u moju osobu. Takve grozne stvari kad doživiš ne možeš više biti isti.
I'm wondering sometimes how many years changing, we change.
Ja nisam sretna s tim, ja sam se sebi više sviđala prije rata. Znači, ne zbog godina, nego zbog onoga, zbog one naivnosti koju sam u sebi imala, zbog vjere u ljudsku dobrotu. Zbog vjere, ne da sam o tome razmišljala, ali zbog vjere da ljudi ne rade drugim ljudima tako jako ružne stvari. A sada znam, vidjela sam, svjesna sam i sada uvijek je tu negdje misao zašto su sve ljudi spremni, sposobni. Za kakve užase su sposobni. Ne mogu reći da ja svaki dan o tome razmišljam, ali kažem, voljela bih da sam onako bezazlena kao što sam prije bila.
Mind you, this is sort of common in all wars, that the person is never really the same again.
Rapes and other atrocity and other crimes were part of that. These things are encouraged, heavily influenced with leaders who gave them permission to first dehumanize and denigrate women, and also to exert some sort of power and control. It is also a way of humiliating the enemy and feeling superior. That is part of our humanity, that kind of evil desire to control and to dominate. The question is how the victims will be able to cope with that in their families, and how many generations, years and decades will go to allow them to heal. Unfortunately, the perpetrators are denying, and there's no signs of true remorse or repentance, which is prerequisite for normal healing and reconciliation.
All these monsters who do all around Sarajevo, it's not only politicians who going on Hague. Everyone who pulled the rope one grenade kills so many. Everyone have to go and get his sentence, proper sentence. Not only commanders and politicians who lead all stuff. Everyone who kill. What's wrong with that? So, and that's what not happened.
That is a major problem. Major problem.
We're going to look at more of people being held accountable next week. But this will give you somewhat of a flavor for it.
What I would like to pass to people, don't take a weapon, simple as it is. It's much better run away from war than make a war. After you kill, even you won the war, after you kill, you have to go to sleep. There is no drug, no alcohol can help you to sleep. After killing even one, it's enough not to have sleep, not to have dream normal. So there's the reason why so many soldiers doing suicide in America, here in Bosnia, just suicide. They cannot cope with that. They kill so many. I'm not talking now about any particular army. Any soldier, any, is not anymore well after shooting, after killing. So just don't take a weapon.
For many, you look at military training and what goes into it, it is very much a psychological training, and it is to convince you that you are not the aggressor. You are there to help, to protect people. And so troops believe that, and then subsequently come to learn we weren't defending, we were indeed the aggressor. And that becomes a very bitter pill to swallow.
On a planet Earth, sorry, whatever you turn and looking, no justice.
Mr. Karadzic, could you please stand? For the reasons summarized during this hearing, the Chamber hereby sentences you, Radovan Karadzic, to a single sentence of 40 years of imprisonment. Please be seated, Mr. Karadzic.
Sorry to have, bounced around different segments like that, but again, I wanted to consolidate that, and I felt the film Sarajevo Rose was so well done and picked up on many different aspects about this environment that was a normal, modern, contemporary city suddenly erupts into this massive bombing and violence. And how do people then cope with it? How do they adapt? How do they survive? It's very painful. And as the doctor indicated, he had seen the worst of people and the best of people in that circumstance. Well, Susan, I know you're there. I see Saidafa has made it on. Dave, if you can unmute Saidafa and Susan. Susan, if you could use raise the hand so Dave can find you. I'll have.
I think I'm good. Can you hear me okay? Good morning.
Yes. Susan, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, Dave, if you'll and Susan, if you'll introduce Saidafa, that would be great.
Well, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, many times I questioned, why did I go to Bosnia? It's because of the one and the others too that I met. It's a powerful story that you were just shown through all these videos of what I know to be real, including her story. And I am grateful that my husband and I received a daughter who was so brilliant, and her mother allowed her to come, and her little brother who stayed and has grown up and now has his own family. But Saidafa is here, living up in Alpharetta, Johns Creek, with her family. We get to enjoy them. She married my project manager, and he already had one degree and came here and got another degree and has an incredible business. But in the meantime, I am very, very honored and happy to introduce Saidafa Dozic Pekamovic.
Well, I'm really grateful to be here. Thank you, Susan. Susan has been an incredible person in my life. I'll touch on that a little bit later, but she is the angel that I feel like we all need in our life at the moments where things just look so helpless, so dark. And I apologize if I get emotional. And Sal, thank you for the invite to be here. Watching Sarajevo Rose, which is one of my favorite pieces, I feel like it speaks so well to the mindset of people in this country. And I want to just share one fun fact. I don't know the audience here well, but some of you might remember this. But actually, I was born in 1984, the year of the Olympics. And What my parents tell me and what our friends tell me is that the year before the Olympics started, or the night before the Olympics started, there was no snow at all. So mind you, this was Winter Olympics and there was no snow. And that evening, so people were all outside, and every day leading up to it, it was like, is it snowing? Has it, what is what are they saying? Is it going to snow? Everyone wakes up every day. Where is the snow? We never had issues having a lot of snow at this time. So a couple hours before midnight, it starts snowing so much that then the worry was, do we have enough people to clean up and prepare the slopes? So then they start advertising on the radio and TV and saying, we need volunteers, anyone and everyone, to help us clean this up and get ready. So everyone, so the citizens and Yugoslav People's Army, they all volunteer. And, coming together, they work together to make the opening hour or everything ready before the opening hour. So we call it the Miracle of Sarajevo Olympics. So I don't know if that was something that some of you remembered, but that was a fact. And so I don't know if you had anything in particular, that you wanted me to talk about. I was not born in Sarajevo. I was born in Srebrenica. And I lived in Srebrenica all the way up until, 1995, July of 1995. Had, normal, small family, small town life with, my dad, my brother, my mom, lots of uncles, cousins, and I think the video describes our mentality really well. Bosnians are just big on family, big on community. If you've seen my big fat Greek wedding, that's us all the time together, out, living life together. And then things just changed overnight. And I think what's really, when you go back and you think about it, you just think it's a dream. I was there, I was 11 when it all happened, the worst of it. And still looking back, it does feel like a dream. And I think it shapes you forever. It changes, as she said in the video, I don't know what my life was supposed to be like if this genocide didn't happen. I probably wouldn't be living in the United States. I don't know that Susan and I would have had a chance to meet, but, things happen for a reason. And, I don't know the reason for all the things. I would say I do consider myself very lucky. One, because I did survive. Two, because I have had an incredible role model in my mom, who was just such a strong figure and just kept saying, we move forward, keep looking forward, keep looking ahead, don't look back. Because looking back was just the worst thing you could do. And asking why was not a helpful, was not an operative, most important question. It was just more so survival ahead. And also because I had people like Susan and Jim in my life that just came to us, at the right moment, and just offered help and offered just hope and offered this vision for a better future. And out of so many kids from Srebrenica, they found me, and I'll just forever be grateful. So I'll just pause there. I don't want to ramble. You let me know if there's anything specific I should talk about.
Having viewed videos of talks that you gave before, a thing that stands out to me is when you're 11 years old and you're in a trench and hiding.
Mm-hmm.
That the Bosnian Serbs are now out hunting for you.
Mm-hmm.
As to how did you make it through that moment, through that time, through that experience? I mean, you're helpless, and I would suspect pretty frightened. But you and the others around you managed to maintain composure through it. How did you do that?
You know, I'll share what I remember from that time. And as a child, I think you just really, there's no way, even if somebody tried to explain it to you in the most thoughtful way, you would really fully grasp what is happening and what is about to happen. But what I do remember is just so much fear on the faces of our parents, our older cousins who understood what was happening. And I remember listening to the radio all the time. And us as kids, you can't sit quiet for 8 to 12 hours and just listen to the radio. And that was just not and you hear it, but you don't understand. I remember our grandparents and parents just saying, you need to be quiet, you need to be quiet. But I think about it from this perspective of my kids today. And I'm always trying to explain things, prepare them for something ahead. I would say what happened in Bosnia was just so confusing even to our parents. There was just no good explanation. We lived, or what we thought we lived, in harmony with our neighbors, as friends, as brothers, as family. And then I would tell you to the day when Srebrenica fell to Serbs, there was just so much denial that is it really going to get that bad? These are our former neighbors. And I would say we were so naive and we never got to really, and I think that's what it's a gift for Bosnia, it's a curse, but we were just so naive till the very last day, believing it's not going to happen, believing there's something good and human on the other side, and so I don't know if I have a really, what gets you through that. I think it's good to have a community, understanding all of us are in this together. And again, we were just lucky that they didn't find us. If they have found us, it would have been a different story. But I do know my brother my brother was very little then, and just, there was a lot of silence. I just remember radio was the only thing that was on. But my parents always talked about their Serb friends, and if they saw them, how they would react. And they still, to the last day, believe that if they saw them, that some human connection would happen and things would be different. It was just, again, so much denial that the worst could happen. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, yeah, no, look, denial is one of my most favorite defense mechanisms.
Yes.
Because, when there's nothing else you can do,
yeah,
what often happens. Let me ask if people in the rest of the class have questions you want to raise. Please use the raise the hand function so Dave can see you, and we can go from there. Yeah. Go ahead, Lauren. I think you're
there I am. I was struck in the video about how they talked about how this is not behind them, that this is very real to them today. And I was wondering how you felt about that.
Susan can speak to this. When I was invited to go to the UN and share my story, and thank you for your question, Lauren, there was part of me that was just sort of, gosh, I'm excited to share something with, this community. I have a lot of resentment towards UN and what they did in my hometown or what they didn't do. But Susan and her husband remember how real and raw that prep was. We had to cancel so many sessions. You can't, I think when you're not talking about this, it can seem like you're moving forward. But anytime you pause and you think back, it just feels like it's next to me. It's this other, being that's really, walking very closely to me. And I think back to the denial, it's just hard for me to think from this perspective that this really did happen. When I read about Srebrenica, it's not just something I read. And there's been a lot of, about Srebrenica in the news with this UN resolution recently, but to me, I'm reliving Srebrenica every time I see something, every time I read something, every time I need to talk about it. This is probably the third formal talk I've ever given or had a chance to talk, UN, my firm. And really it's just so real and so raw. And as a community, I think there was no therapy, Susan's program was just so powerful to help kids and teachers really deal with trauma. But it's something that you have to deal with your whole life. There's no healing. And also, Lauren, what's really challenging is there's never been closure. My dad has never been found. A lot of my family members, every time I go back for a memorial, there's always one cousin, one family member that's being buried. And it's just going back and it's real again. All the emotions, all the memories just come back. And things that you pushed back, you tried to hide, they come back. So as long as you're not talking about it, it feels like you're moving forward. But as soon as you open up the door or read something, it's very much, alive. And when I see that Germany is sponsoring this US resolution on genocide in Srebrenica, it's so powerful to me, given what's happened there with Holocaust. In Bosnia, there's so much denial that this has even happened from the other side that committed these. So it's just hard to keep moving forward when the victims have not been found and they are not admitting that this happened. They're denying, they're fighting the denial. They're saying, all the terrible things that it was made up. It pokes into the wounds, and our community is relatively small. It's hard. This is the mothers and daughters and wives that stayed behind, and I think we're just starting to get some traction and support on the international community, but just not enough to bring people to justice.
Madeline?
Thank you so much for talking to us. And I was wondering if you would be willing to talk a little bit about what happened and what your family did once you came out from hiding underground, and what happened next, and what did you do, and how did you end up moving to Sarajevo?
Mm-hmm.
And my second question is, are you the only family member who came to the United States?
Mm-hmm.
So 2 questions.
So, thank you, Madeline. We were hiding in this place at the beginning of the war, and it was just always there. If things got really bad, they were not too bad. So it's like, if they really get bad, we can always go back. So for a period of time, we just went back and lived in our homes when Srebrenica was sort of designated relatively safe zone. And actually, April of 1993 is when we were designated as a safe zone, and UN troops were sent to Srebrenica. So we lived in our homes for a while until really early July, when it was clear that we were going to be attacked. And it was clear that we really have no way to defend ourselves. And so we just, men and women and kids separated. Women and kids went to the UN base, hoping they would get protection from the UN. And if there is a world that's watching, how can they allow women and children to be just, killed, slaughtered, whatever the term is. But men just never felt like, or majority of them, that they should surround. They should go to the enemy hands. So men decided to go through the woods to reach the next safe area in Bosnia. And a small percentage stayed with women and children, as mainly elderly people that were disabled. So we stayed in with the UN, and then, they overtook the town. And, they basically first almost 2 days were relatively okay. And they started saying, you're going to be okay. We're just going to send you back to the, Bosnian Free Territory. All we want is the land. All we want is the town. Well, that was not the case. They started transporting smaller groups back and forth. And again, somehow we were lucky that we were, we left early. We actually left on the 3rd day. after the third day, all kinds of terrible things were happening. And my dad left with all the, men through the woods and never really, as I said earlier, we don't know what happened to him. And then as, we continued to live as refugees in a place called Tuzla. Then, a lot of elementary schools were converted into refugee camps. So you had groups of families just living in classrooms. You had a mattress to sleep on, and everybody ate together in kind of the main cafeteria. And then you started sort of figuring out your way from there. A lot of people lived there for a very long time. My mom had a friend who lived in Tuzla and said, hey, we have a home that's not in the city, but you and your family can use it. So luckily, we moved into this small, it's kind of like a weekend home, stay there. I went to school. And then after a year, we moved to Sarajevo. And we moved to Sarajevo because a lot of the suburbs of Sarajevo, the Serbs left. And then there were a lot of empty apartments. And then it was sort of survival. It's like, hey, we can't live here much longer. They're empty. Let's see how long we can, So then it was whoever finds a place, you live there. And that didn't last very long either, because the Serbs started coming back and claiming their apartments, even though they left them voluntarily because they didn't want to be part of the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina at the end of the war. They started coming back, claiming their property, and then sort of eviction started happening. So a lot of people left Bosnia. They left for Germany, for Holland, United States. Some stayed back. You had to figure out a way to pay the property or to buy something, rent something. And I think a lot of communities then started like, we're back to normal. You come with nothing, with a little backpack on your back in a country that was devastated by war. How do you just pick up and, create some sort of normalcy? So I think there was just a lot of struggle, a lot of challenges. And really the best way was just to leave, to get out of there and start with a job somewhere else. Bosnia did not have, the economy was not back to where you could have a job. The international community working for a non-government agency was probably the best way to kind of get off, get away from your situation and start making some money and start planning for some future. I am the only person here from my family. Try to bring my brother here, and Susan has been a great part of. We're still working on it. We're not giving up. But when I met Susan and her foundation, they were in Bosnia working with students, kids, and teachers just around, helping them really with trauma, with healing, and through use of expressive art therapies. And, Susan was just an incredible person who said, do you want to come to the United States and study? And I said, it's a dream of every kid. And so then we worked on what does that look like? I had to have good grades, make sure I passed the exams, and Georgia Tech was the only school I applied to. And I was just very, very fortunate to be accepted. And then her and Jim opened up their house and I lived with them. So they have been, I always say I've adopted them as my parents. But my brother is still living in Sarajevo. My mom lives with us now. She helps take care of my girls. I have 3 beautiful daughters. They call Susan Nena, just Bosnian for grandma. And so we live here. They're 11, 7, and 5. And they're just, they're forever going to have a different life because of the connection and just, a person or angel you meet in your life, and they just want to help for no reason, I think Susan's life would have been great, but for some reason she decided to pick of all the countries, of all the projects, come to Bosnia. She could have had a lot more fun projects to work on, but she picked Bosnia and she came to so I'm here.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And what do you do now? It sounds like if your mom is helping take care of the kids, you probably have a job. So
So I studied biomedical engineering, and I'm in a very different field now. I was in the field of medical devices for 5 years. I am in the financial services industry now. Complete pivot. I am helping grow a firm here in Alpharetta. So working with a lot of families, business owners with financial planning, strategies around retirement, legacy planning, estate planning. I just love it. So just lifelong journey of learning.
Wonderful. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you, Madeline.
Anybody else have any questions or anything? Or Susan, do you have anything you'd like to add?
There are stories within stories. It would be so many opportunities around the campfire to tell all the stories that I heard, just even with Zetafa. But at some point, I certainly have started writing and doing video memories. So I hope before I leave this planet to get it all down and get as much out. But Zetafa is at the center of a daughter I never knew I was going to have.
And Bob?
This is directed to you, Susan. And, you know, you've been speaking during the class many times, and I sit here and I can't believe what you have done during those years you were in Bosnia, and I can't believe the amount of self-sacrifice you went through to help people like our guest today. She's here today because of you, and you really need to be commended for the work you do. And I know that doesn't happen too frequently, that people get proper commendation for stuff that they do. And you certainly deserve our appreciation, especially in today's context where we seem to have a really negative attitude towards people who come here from other countries to try to get a better life. And we call them all kinds of bad names and say they're slackers and they're drains on the economy. And some people say they're rapists and that other thing that they say, thieves and criminals and so forth. And we know that's not true, but that's what you watch on TV. So you have my commendation, and I hope the commendation of many other people. Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Beautifully said, Bob. Thank you. Couldn't agree more.
And Sal?
Yeah, I want to, kind of close out by highlighting what has really been the theme that I've tried to get across, and that is whether we're looking at international conflict or we're looking at crime, that we have what's happened in the moment, but then there's also a big story behind what's happened in the moment. And I think we have to deal with the immediate and the long term in parallel, not one at the exclusion of the other. Now, when I talk about the bigger picture, I think one of the criticisms that is there, and it's a criticism I would make of myself, is that I'm somewhat trivializing the event of the moment by saying, look, this stuff has been going on a long time, as if no big deal. Certainly that's not what I mean. What has been the focus of my work was to try to find what is the root cause of all of it. Because we can deal with the event of the moment and we can even rectify it to an extent. But if we never get to the root cause, it's going to happen again.
Yes.
There will be more Bosnias. There will be more genocides. I'm sorry to say that, but when you look at that long history over 5,000 years, these lands here have been dominated by 16 different empires. So, I mean, what empire is the horrific stuff of warfare and enslavement and all of that. So I would like for you to see, and I think it does come through, that the notions of ethnic hatreds, of racial hatreds, religious hatreds are, again, it sounds like I'm trivializing it, but these are merely tools for the people who are really the powers, who keep inflaming, who they don't want to see an end to racial animus, because it is a tool for them. It is what gets people to where they turn on their own families, their neighbors, and commit horror. They get frightened, and fear is the base for hatreds, unfounded by anything in reality. But once that gets there, we get an orgy of violence and horror, and there aren't enough words that can actually communicate the experience, because it is so beyond what words can communicate. Seidefa, I am so thrilled that you were able to carve out time to participate in this class. I know, I'm a post-traumatic stress person too, and even though been in counseling for many years, I still have those moments that can come with no trigger at all, and it just and it will stop me in my tracks. And I mean, I have techniques to deal with that and all, but and it's better. But I think the goal is managing it, so we are able to capture some of our lives. Susan, you don't need me to tell you how much I admire you. You already know that, and really, it is extraordinary that you took it upon yourself. I'm just going to get on a plane and fly there and see what the hell I can do.
Yeah, we talk about it every holiday dinner, everything. We're not really sure why, but she just needed to go.
Crazy, I guess. Now, thank you for what you're doing too, from an educational, knowledge, community, and conversation standpoint. Healing for each of us comes through you in this way.
Bob, did you have one more thing?
Yes, I did. I wanted to show you a book can you see it? A book that's going around that's really good, which underscores what you were talking about, Sal, about inciting fear and then anger. And it's all about Jason Stanley, How Fascism Works. And it's a short little book. I've read it twice already. At my age, I don't remember things as well as I did when I was 21. That's why I read it twice. It's a great book if you all want to read a really great book about this stuff.
Great. Thanks, Bob. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. And
if go on, Sal. Okay. If
Thanks,
everybody
Sal.
can
Thank you all.
Thank you, Sal.
all of our participants. Thank you
all.
very
And
much.
thank you,
Ava and
Susan, and
Sal.
thank you, Sajeda.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful to hear firsthand from people who have been connected and in it. Thank you.
Oh, Lauren, did you have something?
No, I'm just clapping and just giving praise.
Okay. Thank you all.
Bye, all.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And Seidefa, I hope you can feel the group hug
I can. Thank you so much.
Really.
And
yeah.
I'm grateful to see such a great group, studying our history, our what happened in my part of the world. So just really thank you, and love seeing all the smiling faces. So thank you for, being on video for a few minutes. It's just really, really fun to see everybody. So thank you so much, Sal. This is, I hear from Susan, you're doing an amazing job leading this, this important topic. So, and Mama Susan, love you so much.
Next week, we'll have a contrast from, really wonderful human beings, and we'll get to look at Ratko. And as you know, my tendency with the, the monsters of the world is not, I have to look at them as people and look at what went on in their life that manifested that. And so we'll talk about that. I think it is important for us to recognize that some of the people who do really horrible things came from horrible. I've said many times, the most ugliest criminals I ever interacted with, I could always find the frightened child. That's what was back there. And we need to be cognizant of that. So with that, everyone, we'll see you next week. Everybody be safe.
Bye.
Thank you.
Have a great week. Bye.